Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, depending on when you all are watching this. My name is William, and I'll be here to lead today's discussion with a few familiar faces. So, if you watched Jubilee's Middle Ground 2020 election episode on who should be president, you may recognize a few familiar faces here. So, we can with a round robin. We can go around with what our names are. We can go around with our gender pronouns, any roles that we have, and what state you all are from. And I want to quickly say thank you all so much for being here. I'm William. I use he and his pronouns. And roles that I have, I'm the founder and campaign director of Virus Racism, which is a youth-led campaign aiming to raise awareness of discrimination against the Asian American community due to COVID-19. And I'm also a steering committee member at Teens Take Charge, which is a student-led organization fighting for educational equity in New York City. And I'm from New York.
Hello, I'm Shy. I go by she, her pronouns. I am an educator still here in North Carolina. Right now, I'm doing a lot of activism work as far as trying to push for some certain initiatives, especially for students. But other than that, I teach in my spare time.
I'm Joe, he, him. I'm from New York City, just like you, Will. I do a lot of kind of work in the Democratic politics world. Currently, I'm freelancing for the Georgia Senate runoff races, but before that, I was freelancing for a lot of other races and worked full-time on Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaign.
Fantastic. I'm AK. I'm out actually here in Boston. I'm a business owner, a speaker, and also a consultant in the leadership development side. I'm also in the Boston area, and since the election, just been working a lot and just slowing things down a little bit before I get onto some travel in a little bit, but that's just me.
Thank you so much. And I want to quickly welcome Riya, who is also my co-lead for today. So do you want to introduce yourself, Riya?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So sorry I'm late. I was actually on a podcast right before this, so pretty busy day. Hi, I'm a senior in high school. I'm currently applying to college, so that's kind of my life right now. But beyond that, I work a lot with feminism and racial inequality, and so there's a lot of lead up in the election. So I'm excited to co-lead today with Will.
Thank you so much. So I just want to get the panel and the ball rolling with the first question, which is, how did you all get the opportunity to be in this Jubilee episode, and how did you all hear about it? And we can do popcorn style. Anyone can start the discussion right now.
I told Jubilee, I literally started watching their episodes during quarantine. I think I was watching like a complex video, and that was just the next video that played. It was actually a middle ground episode, and after that I got hooked. I went to their website because it seemed like it was just regular average people that was on the show. So I went to their website, realized that they had like a little casting blog. I did maybe like 3 different applications for different shows to be on, and then that was the one that they contacted me for. So it was pretty easy, really.
It was very similar to Shy. My partner, my girlfriend, introduced me to Jubilee, and we were just watching a series of episodes. And I think it might have been one like Democrat versus Republican. And I remember sitting at home and I'm like, oh, how much I would love to be on that show and to do it between Biden and Trump supporters. And then literally a week later, an email came in where they said they're doing a casting call for a few episodes. And I just applied. I did have a little angle to it because I was doing some work in terms of like underground militia groups. So I think I had like a little bit of a side to that during the conversation, but literally it was just, I kind of put out in the atmosphere. And when I got it, it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, I might be the only person who actually like watched Jubilee for longer than quarantine. This is a YouTuber, Casey Neistat. So like I've been a YouTube person for a long time, and so I've watched Jubilee for a long time, but I knew they were always filming in Los Angeles. So I was like, I ain't flying to Los Angeles for a film shoot. They're not going to pay for that plane ticket. But once quarantine hit and they were doing all these virtual episodes, I'm like, sure, I'll put my name in the hat, see what happens. And kind of like AK said, one day this email comes in, Trump versus Biden voters. I'm like, all right, I'll sign up for that. I also applied for the spectrum on Biden voters. I'm kind of glad I didn't get that one because I think almost all of them would have been identical. All the people on that video seemed identical to me. So I've been like, I would have added nothing to that conversation.
Can you describe how you initially felt going into this, and like what were your feelings and thoughts like when you got the opportunity and got selected?
I remember a little nervous at first. Like I was like, I mean, I know what I believe in. Like I feel confident answering any question they give. But I knew that there was a chance the other side would come with like memorized like facts or statistics to try to like get into like the weeds of an argument or whatever and like make it, and try to like out fact you or whatever versus like make it a debate about values and like why you actually want to vote for someone. And I was worried it would go that way, but overall, I think that worry went away. And in like the first 10 minutes, my worry was replaced with, oh my God, I'm debating people that think like wearing a mask is the equivalent to like 9/11.
It doesn't take a ton of money. It just takes leadership to say, let's do this in every single state.
I think we should take this virus seriously. However, I am also worried about protecting our rights in the meantime, because this is reminding me a lot of 9/11, in that 9/11 was obviously something that was very real and affected everybody. But because everybody was so afraid at the time, the government was able to come in and impede on all of our rights.
So my fears kind of shifted.
I was very apprehensive to do this. As a teacher, and literally before we had 2 rounds of interviews. I talked to one person and then I had to speak to another person about Jubilee. Literally that after I had that first interview, it was so weird. Our superintendent of the district sent out an email and was just like, heads up teachers, you're not supposed to be sharing your political views with anyone, blah, blah, blah. So I literally did this in secrecy, if we want to be quite honest. I did this knowing that if my principal found out, if my district found out, I could literally lose my job. So I did this with every single one of those risks involved. I made sure I was like, okay, I got this much money saved up. I can last these many months without a job, worst case scenario. So I literally put myself out there. There have been students since the video aired that have come back and said, hey, Ms. Foy, I saw you on, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, are they going to go to somebody else and now tell this person? And then am I going to get a phone call from my principal to say, hey, can you come to my office so we can discuss this video? Because it is literally stated that we are not supposed to share our political views. But I felt so passionately about it. I teach this every single day. If you have views that you think are important that can help mass numbers of people, you would do the world an injustice if you didn't share those ideas. So I literally have something written and typed up ready to send out just in case I do have to defend myself for Jubilee's video.
And I was apprehensive for 2 reasons. One of them was the filming was 4 hours. So it was a 4-hour conversation that was going to be put into a 30-minute video. And I was worried about like, what parts are you going to include and not include? That's one piece. The second piece is I do engage in a lot of conversations. I grew up in a very conservative environment, and I have these conversations on Facebook with people from the other side all the time. But I would say one of the things that I actually did like about Jubilee is that they didn't have anyone super far on that side. It wasn't like hard MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. So at least I felt they were providing more facts and more information than I do on regular conversations on the topic.
Yeah,
but I was also worried about one thing being said. And I'll be honest, I've looked at the Jubilee comments, and someone talking about the trees comment has been.
Trump just signed a deal where we're going to be planting 1 trillion trees. Trees have a very big importance on our country, on our planet as a whole. So why you want to take away all of these industries that are taking from the planet, but we're going to be giving back to the planet
Doesn't work
when
like
we're
that,
doing
though.
these things.
That was my biggest fear, to be honest. One statement that would blow up in a big way. That was actually my biggest fear. And hopefully nobody said anything super outlandish on my end that I felt got that kind of reaction. So
I only looked at the comments like, also, first of all, like Shy, thank you for like taking that personal risk to like be in the video. Like that is very commendable. Like I'm very fortunate. I didn't feel that risk at all, but like for you to do that and share your views is like incredible.
Big time.
AK, to your point, I looked at the comments when like the video first dropped, and I feel like the big one when it first came out was like a lot of people overseas being like, we also live in a democracy. Like, what are the Trump voters talking about? And like, they're fully right. That is true. They live in a democracy. And I think I don't know if it's the case that like Maggie and the other Trump voters like didn't realize that, or they were just like more focused on America being a democracy. I don't know, but you're right. At some point, the trees kind of took over the comment section, I guess, when they reached the end of the video.
Yeah.
I mean, you all were about to answer this question, but did anyone's comment strike you? Because the comparing COVID-19 to 9/11 and then the trees were very, very like out there. Like, did anyone's comment strike you very hardly?
I'll be honest. I mean, I think I'm not like global warming in the green space isn't an area that I'm well versed in. So the trees comment to me like, okay. I was happy that Joe was on the call that was able to answer some of these questions that I wasn't, well versed on. But I was surprised by how bad of a reaction that got overseas. I mean, that one and also the overseas one. I did feel like when we were sitting on there, I was surprised about what people latched onto and what some people didn't latch onto was one of my biggest surprises.
Yeah, very similar to AK too. I'm definitely not well versed in the whole Green New Deal issue, but when it was said in the back of my head, I was like, those many trees still wouldn't solve like a fraction of the problem.
The reality is he can plant 2 million trees, but the Amazon in Brazil is burning at a rate we've never experienced in global history. And it doesn't matter how many trees we plant in America if the planet's screwed, right? At the end of the day, we have to stop putting carbon in the air. And California is a great example of a state.
Trees absorb carbon.
But we need to stop putting it in the air to begin with. That's the problem. We can't just rely on absorption.
And I was like, okay, maybe I'm just wrong for thinking this. But obviously other people realized that was something that just didn't make sense.
If I could summarize my reaction, like it felt like kind of time and time again, we were having a very great like policy focused debate and values focused debate, but it felt like it kind of seemed like the Biden side was offering like tangible examples of like, here's what we want, like here's the vision we have, and here's what we think Joe Biden's offering, and how like maybe those things can push the world forward. And sometimes I think the Trump side kind of offered an example, like, I think this was in particular with like education. They were like hyper focused in some cases on like having the private education option, or the, they're the more conservative ways of looking at it. But in general, it felt like they were very focused on like Trump's accomplishments and not so like on Trump's vision if he were to be reelected, and like what he would do and like what policies the Republican Party would put forward. Like Mikey routinely was like, I wish the Republican Party was better on this issue. And I kind of, by the end of the video, I was like, why are you voting for these people? Like, what is the thing that they are offering or selling that you like? Because I get it. You've convinced yourself, you think they've done all these great things so far, but like, what is the next thing that they're offering that you're buying into? And I really never got a comprehensive feeling of like what that was for them. And in large part, I think that has to do with the fact, Trump's website leading up to the election was not offering a policy agenda. It was just Trump's accomplishments. Like the GOP platform that he reelected was like Trump's accomplishments, and like was a repeat of the 2016 platform. Like it seems like they really either don't care or were uninterested in like thinking about like the future policies, not just celebrating what they did.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point is great, Joe. I think polarization is like so huge in our country right now, and it's always just like radical right or radical left, and like we just don't know what that in between is looking like. And I think we need to get into that, moving into the future, or else like we're just not going to get anywhere in terms of advancement of anything really. So I guess I'll ask you guys, like, why do you think conversation is so important in terms of listening to other people and like broadening your perspective, and then also understanding where we can come together, from the radical right, from the radical left, into, some sort of compromise so that we can actually make some change or advancement or move forward?
I would say what we've seen over the last 4 years, even just the last 3, several weeks since the election, it has been a Trump show. And it's become that we think like, this is normal. We feel as though because Joe Biden isn't out there every day that he's not a good candidate. No, I think what we've seen over the last 4 years is that we've made the person in power almost seem like a celebrity, that he has to be on every single news feed and every single news channel to be effective. So in addition, like we could see what's even happened afterwards. I think Shai said this beforehand, whether or not he wins or loses the election, he's gonna say either someone stole it or somebody, or count more votes. We've seen this in the same exact time. So I think the problem has to be aware of that Trump is not the type of leader that we want. We wouldn't want this because they wouldn't want this. They wouldn't want Joe Biden to do what Trump did, right? It's going to just cause this to go back and forth. So I think the only thing that's going to have to end up happening is, one, you're seeing people now leave, even Fox News, to go to Parler. That's weird. It's like, I don't know if we are going to be able to come together and have these conversations, because I think the problem is we have two different realities of a situation. And until we can see the same common problem, we can't find a shared solution.
I agree. I've definitely had too many conversations, honestly, with coworkers before I even got on Jubilee, because, at first we would start on social media where we're just typing, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe they're not necessarily understanding what I mean verbally, or maybe I don't understand what they're saying because you just don't get that voice along with those messages that you're reading. So I did decide to confront a lot of educators and say, look, why are you saying these certain things online, knowing that you do teach Black and brown students, and knowing that you are openly supporting someone who really doesn't have their best interest in mind? And I felt like through those conversations that we had, we still kept hitting brick walls. I did have some conversations with people where they began to at least understand where I was coming from and understand why some of their beliefs could definitely be challenged or, viewed a little bit differently. But ultimately, sometimes, like AK said, these conversations, they can help, but it still doesn't really solve the problem because we don't live those same realities. They don't live the same realities as some of our students. So we can say all day that we want the world to change. We can say that we want equity and equality, but until we actually go through those experiences and we actually have to depend on the government because there's nothing else there, that's when I believe that people will really understand what the other side views.
Yeah, I mean, I think Shai and AK both put it super well. I could say in my personal experience, like I feel fairly confident saying I've moved my parents more left than where they were a decade or 2 decades ago, right? They were straight R Republican voters, and now they're both registered Democrats. So like, I feel like a lot of that is Trump being such an extreme polarizing person, but I also think a lot of that is me rubbing off and influencing them and talking a lot and forcing them to watch Vox videos and like trying to like shift their mind very slowly over years, right? And like, you're not going to win on every issue, but like if I asked my mom what defund the police means, like she could give you a definition that didn't come from Fox News, right? She'll give you the real definition. She might not agree with the abolitionist movement and everything behind it, but she at least understands. And I to AK's point, like until we all understand the common problem and understand what the actual solutions are, it's so hard to have a rational debate. There was a survey that came out from a polling group, Data for Progress, yesterday, and it basically surveyed in swing districts, how did Republican and Democrat voters look at the congressional candidates and the issues. And one of the questions was, do you think the Democrat running in your district was a socialist? Now, I think all of us here know that the congressional candidates running in swing districts were not identifying themselves as socialist, but like 70-something% of the Republican respondents in that survey said their congressional candidate on the Democrat side was running as a socialist. So like, it's hard. It's hard to have real dialogue when people are very divorced from reality. And when they are, to Shai's point with like being online and Facebook, if you scroll down your Facebook feed every day or watch an hour of Fox or whatever it is, like you can have a conversation with someone and then like in an hour, everything you just did gets undone because they just consumed all of this other stuff that like makes them retreat back to how they originally felt, where they're comfortable and make sense and all that. So I don't know. This is a really thorny problem to solve. Maybe some of them will retreat to Newsmax and Parler and like just be forever gone. And some percent of them are left that we can kind of talk to rationally. But I don't know. This is like the existential question for America right now.
Well, I would touch on that, Joe, because what we have seen since the election, simply because Fox News declared Joe Biden the winner, Trump bashed Fox News, right? Even on Krebs, like just because you don't agree with him, you were bashed because he's still in power. I think we'll actually see a bigger turn as soon as he's in office. And I think more Republicans will now stand up and say, you know what, these last 4 years, Trump may not have been the best for the party. And because he's bashing Fox News, as they go on to OANN and they go on to Newsmax or even Trump television, whatever happens, I don't think those sources would be as credible. If anybody comes and says, I got this news from Trump TV or OANN, it's like, that's kind of some questionable content. But I do feel like the things will start switching the other direction once Trump is in office, and people will then begin to start speaking openly about how they felt about him.
I hope so. I genuinely hope so, because that would obviously get things back to at least how they were under Obama, which was like not great for the political discourse, but a lot better than it was under Trump. So it'd be nice to start walking back. That said, I don't know, like the fact that 100-something House Republicans signed on to that, like arguably treasonous attempt to like break up the union, it's horrifying, it's horrifying. And I don't know, it is tough. It is tough to see where we go. I mean, we elected House members in this latest election cycle. One of them was like a full QAnon believer. Like you can scroll through her Twitter for years. And like, this wasn't just like yesterday she picked it up. Like for years, she was like full in conspiracy world, like deep in it. And now she's a member of Congress representing Georgia. Like we elected another guy, I think he's now the youngest member of Congress, who like intentionally like visited one of like Hitler's vacation homes or something because he likes Hitler. Like, I mean, we are sending crazy people to Congress now. And I don't know. I am just still mildly horrified of what's to come, but I hope you're right. And that like Fox somehow keeps enough of them in their bubble that like they don't go all the way to OAN and Newsmax. But I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I kind of disagree, AK. I don't think Republicans nor Fox is still doing a good enough job. I agree with with Congress. I don't think they're doing enough. Even my current legislators that we have in North Carolina, I've written both of them like, why have you all not stood up to Trump? Why is it that y'all are literally just sitting in the Senate chilling and not telling him that he should verbally concede? So they are not, I don't think they're doing enough.
I mean, I just love to ask, how do you, I think, make sure that your legislators are being held accountable? I don't think that we talk about that enough, or, our civic duty is to, make sure that our representatives are representing us. But I don't think that we do that enough, or, our representatives just aren't being vocal about issues that they're. So, Shai, I'd love if you could just, talk about that a little more.
This current school year, I had my students do an assignment where they actually researched their local congressman, where they knew who their senator was based off of their address. All right, now go to these people's pages, look at what types of bills that they've passed or bills that they've signed. So it's just literally, you have to make yourself aware about it. The average American is not going to do that though. But people who actually do care about certain issues, who see which problems could technically be fixed in their street or in their community, those are the ones. But I am that individual where I keep their phone numbers in my phone. I have draft emails ready just to hit send. I just need to change a couple words here and there, put a couple of statistics down here, but I am extremely active. I have to call them. I have to send them emails, send them a letter to let them know we're watching you. We know that you are not supporting our same beliefs. You are not, especially when it comes to education. We do a lot of rallies and protests in North Carolina where we're like, look, these are the names of the folks who support us. These are the names of the people who do not. We need to pressure those folks who don't support us more than those who actually do, because it's actually swaying those non-supporters to now start to look and see who their constituents are. If we don't vote y'all in, then who will? And there's 100,000 teachers in North Carolina that can technically make a difference in an election, depending on if it's a Senate race or just the local House race too.
100%. I mean, thousands, hundreds, so many votes can make a difference. And I was looking at an article from The Hill earlier, and it said about like 60,000 votes went to Kanye West. And I'm like, no, like, he supported Trump. Don't you think he's still going to support Trump and carry his ideas? And so just like, and going back to the video specifically, because I remember there was one statement on fake news and how does the other side circulate more fake news? How do you all, we're in that discussion right now, and even just right now, how do you all think about the conversation on quote unquote fake news and just within the Jubilee episode?
Well, I mean, I'll even touch on what Shai was just saying. I think these last 4 years, what surprised me the most isn't Trump or even legislative. It just revealed that half of the population thinks this way. I mean, So that's the biggest worry, because even if he leaves, those thoughts and those beliefs are still there, either on, no matter what side you're on. So it just more or less revealed that. And the funny thing is Shai, yes, congrats, you were very active. But Shai has just as much voting power as someone that just absorbs fake news and goes to the voting booth, right? Has just as much. As a matter of fact, if you grow up, if you're in Alabama or Wyoming, you might actually have more because of the electoral college based on the population. So that's what I find crazy. I'm not saying that anybody should have more votes over the other, but you can be more informed or less informed. But the people that are coming in and representing them are people that maybe that person that was QAnon in that particular region may reflect those views based on those, and the constituents is not going to be for us. It's going to be for those people that put them into office. That's what worries me the most. And with fake news, I'm even more about fake news. And now you even have, what is that other one? Those deep fakes. It's going to be, if we think it's crazy now, I'm just saying, wait till technology goes where that fake news, it will be hard to tell from, like, did that person actually say this or not say this due to technology?
Definitely. I mean, just kind of touching on that point, the role of social media and media in general, like, has obviously played a huge role in our lives, and they perpetuate certain perspectives. And so sometimes we find ourselves in this echo chamber of like our own views, and we can't always see content that isn't reflective of our own views. So I'd love your guys, thoughts on how do we broaden our perspectives? How do we make sure that we're listening to, maybe the other side, and starting to, not just kind of venture beyond what we think and, our views.
I mean, it's definitely tough because the algorithms want you to follow, like, and share the people that you're going to engage with the most. And so on Facebook in particular, that really builds an echo chamber. I think Twitter, depending on who you follow and what kind of accounts you follow, it's a little bit easier to break that echo chamber, because it's more common on Twitter for a debate or a fight between people on opposing sides to like leak onto each other's feeds, because of like how retweets and quote tweets work and all that. So I think on Twitter, it's a little bit easier to at least see what the other side is saying, because your side might be in like a back and forth with them. In general, for me, it's less about like politics, and it's more about, I try on Twitter to curate and follow a lot of experts in different subject areas that I care about, because like for me, it's like they're a really great reporter or think tank researcher type or whatever it is in that area. And so like I know when they're putting stuff out, like they've spent tens of years or many years of their life like on this topic, and like they're super smart about it. And so if they're putting this out to their audience, that is clearly something they care about and think is truthful and articulate. And if I go read that, that is like good information for me to process and think about. So I try to think of it less about like following left or right politicians, more just about like finding smart people and like listening to what they say.
100%. And I remember at one point in the episode, I think you said this, where for instance, Fox News, they don't bring in experts to talk about climate change or social justice or prison reform. Like they bring in like media personnel and personality stars, where in something more like the New York Times and something where we know about its authenticity more, they bring in experts to talk about climate change and social reform and prison reform. And so the conversation about the media, I feel like it's so important, yet it's not grasping a lot of people because of the other conversation on fake news. And so shifting back more towards the actual episode, I remember, and shifting gears a little bit, I remember one person said about how public education isn't the same thing as good education, and how we need to make sure that overall, I remember you said, Joe, that we need to make sure that we give everyone the right to education. For those who want to spend extra money on the education that they want to, then they can, but we need to make sure that we have education, give everyone the right to education first. And so this is to anyone, but also Joe, how did you all feel about that comment?
For me, the main point there was like, if you think about a lot of public schools in this country, and Shai hit on this, I don't know if they made the video or not, but she was talking about her textbook didn't even have Obama in it. And for me, that I think about like how that is the case in so many districts and so many zip codes around this country, because often the way schools are funded is based on like the property taxes of that district or zip code. And so if you have a lot of housing inequality and wealth inequality in a zip code, inherently that's going to make the schools more inequitable, and it just perpetuates this cycle. And so for me, it's like not just about the right to go to a public school, like there's a public school everywhere, but the right to go to like a great public school and the right to like grow up with the best possible education, teachers that are actually paid well. We've seen in the past few years a lot of states where like teachers had to go on strike because they're working 2 or 3 jobs. Like that's insane. We should not be paying our teachers the lowest possible wage and stressing them out like that, paying for their own school supplies. Like we can do so much better. And to me, when I say like the right to an education, like that's what I mean, like a great public education that everyone has access to universally.
And just to piggyback off that, I believe that creating this idea of accessible education for everybody doesn't necessarily mean bring in the competition factor with like charter schools and so on, because I still look at it from this perspective. If we have like, and I'll go just based off of what I know. In my state, where we have charter schools, you still have to apply to go to those better schools. So if I'm in a community and my mom and my dad or whoever isn't active in my life, I'll never get that chance to technically apply. I'm going to need my parents' consent, and they're not even in the house. They don't value education as much as I, the child, might. So you still see that even though they claim that charter schools are supposed to help improve the quality of education, it's only improving the quality of education for that small group that actually can be accepted in there. Those students who might be suffering from poverty, or even students that might have disabilities as well, they're to those charter schools because they would look at them as being the reason that those scores might end up dropping. That's why I say in order to fix education, you need to fix what is accessible to everybody right now, which is public schools. Every student can go to public schools. We need to, like Joe said, make sure that we're supplying teachers with what they need. Teachers, I still say, look, we need free mental health counseling. We try to advocate that for our students as well, but we struggle mentally. And you can't have a teacher that doesn't have the right headspace going into a classroom, putting their all in it. So there's just too much that we need to do at this point to get education up to par. I'm one of those radical teachers that say we need to like literally reform and restructure education from the bottom up. Nothing we are doing right now is working. Nothing.
I just want to quickly touch on, Shai, if you can, elaborate on this. Do you think that our methods of assessing students should be changed? Because, I mean, let's just talk about the SAT. I'm a senior in high school and I'm applying. Like, I think just eliminate or not having to submit your SAT score has just automatically made the college process this year so much more equitable. Because, I mean, like someone like me that has access to resources, for SAT prep, like my parents have spent money on tutors, but that's not the same that's not the same experience that other people have had. So, I think that I just wanted to kind of, get your perspective on that really quickly.
Matter of fact, that's the grassroots organization. Right now I'm working with actually international wide now. We've expanded just from the United States to somebody in every single continent. But what we're doing right now is trying to push for end of standardized testing, not only during the pandemic, but also beyond that. I actually started educating myself. I was reading this book called More Than a Score. And that is when I realized, these tests don't do anything but determine your zip code and how much money your family makes. Nobody should care about that as a part of an SAT test or a reason that I should be promoted from biology to chemistry. So I 100% agree that standardized tests need to be put to an end. We have teachers create their own classroom tests based off of what they teach. It also allows teachers to have a little bit more freedom. We always say public education doesn't actually teach students what they need to know. And that's because teachers are stressed out about having to teach to the test. Oh, they need to know about political structures. They need to know about this, but we're not actually giving them the why and the how of how things actually work.
And to touch on that, I also work through a lot of work. I never talked about this in the show. I do educational consulting, help international families go to school in the United States. And when the Harvard admissions case came out, they were talking about how, the SAT scores and how that's going to, help them get into college. But when you look at the actual numbers, I think it's 66. There's 66 different majors at Harvard, I believe. And only, I think it was like 20 of those actually deal with math and English. So yes, you have an SAT score, but that's not going to help them in terms of dance or music or all of those or all those other subjects. And if you were only able to only fill people in the math and sciences, then that would then say that those other teachers, those other departments of those schools would not be adequately have enough students for them to even run their programs. I think we're forgetting that school isn't just about those two subjects in the STEM fields, but there's other subjects as well that are not going to be scored based on a standardized test.
Blue to red voters is actually very, very small. Most people are idealistically in a certain camp. And most campaign tactics persuade people it's like affecting a very small band of like, who can you move? I guess I am idealistic in that I do hope one day there's like some breakthrough and you can keep slowly pulling people and helping them understand the problems we're trying to solve. But at the end of the day, like I agree, like you have to realize progressives and even the Democratic Party as a whole are not the most popular people in America. I think they're well misunderstood in their intentions and their branding, and you can debate why, but that is like the reality. And like, you're not going to win everything, and you have to figure out where you can compromise and where you can get stuff done. I think right now in the Senate with Bernie Sanders and Josh Hawley, a Senate Republican, joining forces to do the standalone bill to send COVID relief checks or stimulus checks to people. Like, to me, that was a great example of like a super lefty senator, a super right-wing senator, like finding a way to like get through the mess and just like make a great standalone bill that, if passed, would like provide immediate relief again to every single American that needs it. And I feel like we need more of that, because I know there's a lot more places where you can find a progressive and even a right-wing Republican that can see the obvious thing to do and can just cut through the awful negotiating by leadership on both sides and just like pass it.
Well, I would touch, the thing that I feel about that is people always talked about Obama, but Obama never came into office and said, I'm only here for Democrats. He was not so pro-life. People just said, oh, he wasn't for cops just because he didn't attend a cop's funeral. But he did not fuel, I think, the racial divide in this country. I would say that Trump literally came in on day one saying that other side is the enemy. Like, you can do that based on like in a sense of that, but when you are the president of the United States, your job is to be for all people. And he never came in to do that. And he made it like, just like Mitch McConnell was like, when you're going to make it a one-term president, Trump was the same thing. It is either you're for me and against me. But what I worry about is that you're going to see Republicans like, hey, let's all come together until they get into power. And what will they do? Oh, no. Who cares what the other side says? But the Democrats are going to be idealistic. Okay, maybe they want to do something. No, they need to show that they're willing to meet when they have power and in the seat, and not just do it when we're always on the outside or when we're on top. That's what I worry about the most. I feel like there's going to be progress, but as soon as they get power again, they're going to do the same thing they did before. I
think one of the things that I really, really, really wish the Democrats had the spine to do, and you kind of touched on this earlier, like the Electoral College is a perfect example. There's a lot of ways where the machinery of our democracy that was invented over 200 years ago is like clearly falling apart. And it is no longer scaling to the size of the country we have and the way it's kind of organized itself. You know, you could look at House apportionment, gerrymandering, the Electoral College, voting rights. Like, there's so many places where it's like the machinery is just falling apart. And if we don't repair the machine, which I know is not exciting and it's not something that gets people up in the morning if you're normal, but like that stuff is super important. If we don't do it, to your point, AK, like we are just going to keep going in this loop over and over again. Democrats build on Obamacare, then Republicans get in office and they tear it back down more. Like we're just going to get stuck in this cycle. And so if we don't, I don't know who and when we're going to have the courage to like finally like amend the Constitution and like fix these core problems, but like we got to do it, because otherwise, you know, we are just going to keep watching this tick back forth.
This is where I kind of go into the idea of when Biden does take office in January, we got to hold him accountable. So I think we as the voters should be pressuring him, amend the Constitution. We need to get rid of this electoral college system. There's nothing really in the Constitution, to my knowledge, about packing the court. So are we able to balance out this court system that we have? I know it's shocking a lot of people that, you know, they aren't necessarily backing Trump on every single step, but until how long though? Like, are we going to see anything change from that point? So I think once he takes office, voters definitely need to hold him accountable to fix a lot of these machines and these issues.
I was going to say, and I think right now, I think because people weren't excited about Biden when he was coming in, as you know, it was more about a no Trump versus a pro Biden. And because people were saying that Biden is racist or was this, I think Biden will actually step up more because he was getting bashed before he even got into office. So I think he's going to feel like I have to kind of step up. I can't just be what I've done beforehand. I think we're going to see a different Biden in these next 4 years.
100%. I also remember because the 1994 crime bill I read it online, like the largest crime bill ever. And I can't remember who said this, or I could be totally mixing up this with another video, but he did take accountability for it. He has taken accountability for his actions. And that's something that we've never seen with Trump. Like, he always justifies his racism or his sexism or his xenophobia. And for these last 4 years, which feels like 10, 100 years, I've never seen him post on Twitter about an apology or anything, about any form of regret about any of his choices. Whereas, like what you all said earlier, Joe Biden, I think he's going to be a new Joe Biden. He's going to take accountability. And that's what we really need right now.
I hope so. I love AK's optimism. I genuinely do. Like, I really hope, he comes in strong on day one and it's just like executive order to fix and undo Trump's terrible environmental thing or whatever, right? And like starts putting the country back together. I do worry about, though, the bigger, more structural things. I think he said he's going to put together a commission that's going to spend 6 months figuring out how to deal with the Supreme Court and the federal district courts. I am skeptical that he would come up with something that could be akin to packing the court, even though I think it is clearly, from just a pure mathematical perspective, remove party, it's clearly super imbalanced. And it's clearly super imbalanced because two presidents that didn't win the popular vote got to add a bunch of justices to it. And if you think about people who actually advocate for packing the court, they do it in a very unpartisan way. It's like, if you add a few more justices to balance it out at the moment, and then you set in a rotating set of term limits, so let's say like every president gets to nominate 2 justices, suddenly like the partisanry of this whole thing goes out the door, because every president has the opportunity to put someone on the court. And it seems like, again, if you're just looking at it rationally without politics, like, you can make great reforms that don't benefit one part or the other intentionally, but I just don't know if he's going to have the backbone to like do that political fight. I think the one that I feel the most confident about is, it seems like he's very, based on his appointments so far with like John Kerry, for example, on the foreign side and soon to be so on the domestic side, he seems like he really wants to put climate policy in the forefront of a lot of his economic rebuilding post-COVID. And so I feel like that's the one he's going to do a really big fight on with Republicans, but I don't know how much ammo there's going to be for a lot of the other stuff. And it's really sad, because I wish if we could, before 2024, we could abolish the Electoral College. God, I would love to do that. But I just don't know if he's going to have the courage to take that fight on.
No, but that's why I think the positive is what we're seeing now with Trump. It was the Trump show, meaning you don't even know what his policies were, whatever Trump wants on that day.
Sure.
The benefit of what I see of Biden is that he isn't strong-willed in that area. So it is going to go back to the people that he brings onto his team is going to help move the direction forward. Trump made it this dictatorship. Well, I think Biden, because he isn't I don't think he likes speaking that often, to be honest, or presenting, but I think it will cause him to actually bring in people that are experienced and have knowledge more than the average person, not just someone that pays the highest amount to their campaign, to actually move things forward. And I think it will allow him to actually play the role of president, of managing, and not just being a dictator.
Yeah, I mean, what do you guys think is the role of a president in using social media? I mean, we saw Trump almost abuse social media. And I mean, although it's a direct line to the people, it's not necessarily the best line to the people, because there's a lot of spread of misinformation, as we saw with Trump. So, I mean, what do you, I guess, expect of Biden in terms of social media? And like, what's that like line between yes and no of the use of social media?
I would disagree that it's a bad place for it. I think the media is where a lot of the, whether it's good media or bad media, it's where a lot of the overlay gets thrown on, right? social media, is used very successfully by Obama to just get straight to the people, right? Like you can do a live stream straight from the White House on Twitter or YouTube or whatever, no media filter around it. And you can just deliver your message straight, around every State of the Union, the Obama White House would, blow up social media with everything that they're putting out during the speech. And that way you just have it straight from them on social media. That said, like, I think it's obvious, right? Like, I don't expect Biden to be up at 11 o'clock eating a cheeseburger, talking about firing the defense secretary, right? Like, I think those days are out the door. And I think there will be some normalcy to it.
Yeah, I still think Joe Biden should use social media. When we think about like tactics that Republicans are using, the interesting part is even though this might be like a party of older white men, they are really using social media to their benefit. So I feel like if Biden doesn't use it, then he's going to miss out on an entire group of Americans that could potentially vote for him in his next reelection.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was having this conversation earlier with my partner. We'll see if this makes it, but to be honest, it is a very, very powerful engine. But if all of a sudden Jack Dorsey said, you know what, Trump, you're gone. Like you're abusing it too much. That would really silence his voice. And I go back and forth on it personally. I mean, the way that he's using it in terms of spreading misinformation with his power, targeting individuals, I do not think that's the role that it should be used. Now, it's very different if I use it. I don't have that much influence. But when you have the president of the United States using it, I think it does need to be regulated, just like businesses need to be regulated. Like you have a responsibility, and if you're not going to follow by those responsibilities, then I think it should be regulated to some capacity.
100%. I mean, I feel like social media for at least Gen Z and teenagers right now is how they get a lot of information. Personally, as a 16-year-old who goes on social media 24/7, I get a lot of new information and a lot of things going on in the world through social media. But when the president of the US says that you should do some crazy act and that'll cure COVID-19, that's misinformation. That's like, no, like just don't say that. But versus a teenager spreading information and awareness and Gen Z spreading awareness of the things going on in the world, that's different. And that's more positive. And that's something that we need to make sure that we do more reinforcements on.
And the thing about Trump with it is if I say something, okay, where did he get his information? But you're assuming if Trump says something, he has all the briefings and should know. So you're assuming that what he's saying might be actually truth because he should have all the information. So him spreading misinformation is just odd to me, because where is he getting it from then? Is it from his own psyche or is it from some random person on Fox News? I think that's very, very dangerous because we're assuming that he's getting his information from intelligent sources.
It's like if the president can't get it right, who can? And then it's like, where do we actually get this accurate information? He has that access to all of the right places, all of the experts, and then what else is the American public supposed to turn to? So, I mean, I guess I wanted to ask all of you, what do you think is the role of youth in, the next upcoming, or just the political scene in general? I mean, all of you have different perspectives in terms of, where you've come from and your lived experiences. So where do you think youth lie in the political scene right now?
I would love to start this one. So one of the races I helped out on was Ed Markey's Senate reelection. And what was great about that was there were so many young people that are in Massachusetts, but also just around the country that got super involved in that campaign. AK, you probably read about it a little being in Massachusetts. And it really powered a grassroots movement for that campaign that called so many and texted so many people in Massachusetts that just made a whole vibe that I think really propelled him past a Kennedy in Massachusetts, which a lot of people thought was not going to happen. Young people at Sunrise have also, I think, moved the bar so far on climate. Go back a few years, who was talking about climate? Now the next president thinks it's a major economic priority for his administration. That's the Sunrise movement, kicking into full gear and organizing. And that is all young people. So I think young people, no matter where you are in this country, there is a movement, whether it's Black Lives Matter, Sunrise, Indivisible, find a movement if you want to get involved, find a campaign you want to get involved with, whatever it is, you will make a difference.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking the same. Like I teach my students all the time, like if there's not even an organization that you're thinking of that you can get involved in, start it. Like I have been a part of too many protests, too many activist movements where we literally started it ourselves from the bottom. This is what we need. These are the people that can help us get our voices out. So it is completely possible to think about what your key issues are, who those folks are that might be able to help push those ideas. And if there's no team or organization already out there, then get your people in line. Those who support you, started off with a petition, started off with just gathering in somebody's living room, talking about how can we take a step further. But I definitely think young people, they have to do it, because if they don't, nobody's going to be there in 30, 40 years to do it for them. So if you all start now, then you're securing your future way down the line.
Yeah, and you've already said it so well, Joe and Shai, and right, I would just build on that. I would say, what can they do? Like, they don't need to be told, they're already doing it. I mean, honestly, if it was possible, I would lower the voting age. I mean, I find it surprising that if you're 18 years old, you can't vote, but we're making decisions based on youth. I mean, if I could, I would say if you are able to go to the voting booth, you should be able to vote. And that's what I would hope for, down the road, because I think they're more politically engaged. They're aware of situations that are going on. And I think decisions are being made on their behalf that they don't have a choice in, but I would love to have them be a part of the conversation and also be able to vote, because they're doing a phenomenal job.
I could jump on that real quick. Jubilee put out the fifth graders spectrum video the other day. And at one point they asked, are you scared of climate change? And one of the fifth graders was like, the fires we experienced, and like, this is like a real problem for us. And I'm like, that kid knows more about climate change than some adults. Like, he connected the dots, or she, I don't remember which one said it, but it was like, AK, you're 100% right. Like, the internet, I think, has really helped people growing up in this era, like, be more connected and self-aware of the issues. And so it feels just insane to me that you have to be 18 or the election or whatever it is to vote in a primary or a general. Like, I think that's crazy. 16 is like the goal that activists will frequently tout, but sometimes I'm like, I don't even think 16 is low enough.
I mean, just in general, this is kind of veering a little bit off, but I mean, I'd love to hear your perspective on performative activism. I think that's something that we saw a lot, especially after George Floyd, like a lot of people just kind of posting on their stories or just posting on their social media. The Black Square was pretty controversial as well, because everyone just kind of posted and then didn't really know anything about it. A lot of people use the hashtag Black Lives Matter when that wasn't meant to be used in that perspective. So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm more interested in people who are doing the work when nobody's watching you. Like integrity, for example. So yeah, posting the Black Square, that matters. Yes, they made a lot of people click and figure out, what's this Black Square about? What is this whole movement? So it does help to an extent, even when we think about like algorithms and how social media works. But true activism, like, you are deep involved. And when I say deep involved, it doesn't necessarily mean like putting your life on the line in the middle of the street holding signs, but it could be you're in the background calling those family members who are racist, or those conservative family members, and explaining why they should think differently. It can even be just, helping out, maybe passing out letters or signing people up to vote. But to me, those are the things that actually matter, not just, posting something to say I posted it and I support the movement, but then we don't even see you doing anything else after that point in time.
I want to build off what Shai said. Like, that 100% agree that if you want to like call yourself an activist, then you have to actually be actively doing real work. I will say to the young people watching this that like in their Instagram stories see like the cards of like maybe an issue popped up and there's someone put in their story like an Instagram card set. I think that's like sharing that stuff is super helpful. And the reason I say that is, one, awareness is always important. Not everyone is going to be aware of a problem. And there was this graphic I saw someone made once where it was like, imagine this is your Instagram bubble, right? It's like a bunch of dots, and these are your close friends. Maybe all of them, because they're your close friends, they're like kind of similar minded, right? But you're friends with people on Instagram that aren't close friends who are similar minded. Maybe they're a cousin or friend from a different school or whatever it is, right? And they think differently. And so they're like a branch off in here. Maybe you have some other friends that branch off here. Your Instagram story is reaching all those people. And maybe one of them sees that post and then shares it to their network. And now you have this networking effect, right? Where one by one, you are getting this one post with some helpful graphics actually explaining an issue in front of all of these people that maybe never would have saw it before, maybe would have never saw the issue articulated in like a super easy, digestible way. So if you see like a well-crafted like set of slides on Instagram that's like explaining an issue, I do encourage people to share it, not because it like makes you an activist or something, but because like you might be like genuinely spreading awareness to people that otherwise would have like never connected with that issue. Just obviously make sure what you're sharing is like, you know, it seems credible. It seems like if you Google some of the facts or they cite the sources, whatever it may be, like just make sure you're not spreading bad stuff. But like in general, I encourage people to do that.
I find this question a little hard. And because of our time, I would say there's a lot of positives with, I'll say, social media activism, because it's be able to spread relatively quickly. But because of social media, we're just now more aware of situations that are happening. We no longer just finding it on our nightly news or in the newspaper. But there's always something that we could be fighting for because so many things are coming up. But because within social media activism, we don't have that one person that's driving the mission. And I think it's harder to get things done. So in the civil rights movement, they at least had a leader that they can go to. Like, oh yeah, that's part of the mission. That's not part of the agenda. And because of social media, it's easy to get it hijacked. So easy to get it hijacked because nobody knows what it is. So what I think what's happening right now is everybody's saying something new. What you should do with Black Lives Matter or with this is that people are like, just tell me something I should do. Okay, cool. I can put a black screen. Okay, I'm doing something, because they don't know exactly what to do because everyone is telling them to do something different. I almost wish we can go back where people would just say, hey, I'm this individual that's leading this cause. I can at least say this is part of the cause, this is not part of the cause, and this is the direction that we're trying to go. So I see the pro and con, and I don't really look bad on the performative because I think they don't know what else to do. It'd either be that or really nothing.
That makes a lot of sense, because I feel like performative activism, I feel like that's a really big issue that's impacting not only just youth and Gen Z, but also just people in general, because the label of activist, I feel like you posting stuff on social media, you posting graphics and new information, that is very important. That should be done. But I don't think you should call yourself an activist for doing that, because I think that's just human decency. Like, for spreading awareness of things, I think that's just human decency. And so going back, this is a little bit shifting gears, but still in a performative realm. I kind of see Donald Trump as a performative politician, because he says a lot on, like, he's helping the Black community, he's helping the Asian community, he's helping the LGBTQ plus community. But I can't look back at these 4 years and think, what has he done? Because also his supporters say that he's done a lot for the Asian community, that he's done a lot for the Black community. But what has he done? I can't imagine in my head right now. So if you all want to talk about that, that would be amazing, because I can't remember anything.
I mean, it all goes based on the perspective. So they could say within Trump, at the end of the day, the question, no matter what side you're on, is, okay, we want to make sure that our communities are safe. We want to make sure that we have economic prosperity. He's looking at through like, hey, by removing deregulation, by putting money into entrepreneurship and business is going to help the Black community. By donating money to HBCUs, that's helping, people of color in that realm. Yes, it may be, I think his issue is usually like, how can we throw money at the problem? But I also feel like he throws money at the problem, but at the same time would come in and say, you athletes, you're SOBs because you're fighting for this cause, right? Or, everyone that is protesting are thugs. So the reason why it's weird is because he'll throw money at the problem, but it feels like he doesn't actually believe it by his actions and his beliefs. But if you're on one side, they're going to say, yeah, he supports it by financially, but the other side is like, well, he's a straight up racist. Both can be right, both can be wrong, but I think it matters which side you're on and how you see the perspective.
100%. I mean, 100%. And I think given the time that we have left, and also I think we can begin to wrap up this conversation, I think we can each go around and say something that we've learned or something since the Jubilee episode. I our perspective on something and anything that we want to say before this conversation ends?
Yeah, I think it's the last thing. One of the biggest feelings that I had when I was going into the voting booth was I thought there were just we were very, very divided. I was feeling as though every single tweet, every single thing was causing this tightness in my chest because it was just so much of just this show. And I would say since the election, I would say it has been much peaceful, right? It was not just for a pro-Biden, but I would say the election showed this, is that it wasn't so much that people are happy that Biden won, but I think it just showed just how many people were unhappy with Trump and that people are voting not just for the economy, they're actually voting for civility. And I think civility won. And that is what people are beginning to see, where now his tweets are no longer affecting me as much. I'm actually much more calmer. There's much more easier conversations with people. And I think it's easing the tension in a year that has been pretty crazy.
I don't know if this is something I learned or I guess I've observed. I feel like going into November, the left really put aside its differences with Biden. Like, name any prominent person on the left, like they were out knocking doors. Well, not necessarily knocking doors, but doing the work to help get Biden elected. They weren't out trying to criticize him every day. Like, the left really said, this isn't about left versus center right now. This is about like surviving democracy, like keeping the country going. And so I think it did what it was asked to do, which is play the game, just help us win. And I feel like right now, Biden has not necessarily been reciprocal of that in his appointments to the cabinet. I was hoping he would be a little bit kinder to the left as he assembled his cabinet and his kind of top White House team. So that's been unfortunate. That said, obviously I knew who we were electing was not some super lefty progressive champion. So like, it is what it is. We'll just have to keep pushing on through the rest of the administration and hope the people he's electing will continue with an open ear and genuinely listen to the concerns of those on the other side.
I think I'm a little opposite of what AK said. Going into election day, I was too optimistic. I truly believe like we are not as divided. This will be an easy, like Biden is going to take it away and we'll actually know the night of, regardless of the mail-in ballots. But I think watching those election results day after day after day, it made me realize that we are truly a divided nation. There are still people, what was the difference? Maybe 6 or 5 million votes difference, I believe. So it showed me that there was still too many people that supported the bigotry of Donald Trump. And then afterwards, the count every vote, but don't count the votes here protests that were going on. It just made me realize that this is America. We will never technically see eye to eye on social human rights issues, sadly.
Yeah, as a youth, I think I still have hope, and I still am hoping that we can come together, with this conversation. I think we can just outrightly say how polarized our nation is and how we really, really need to start coming together if we do want to have any, change or anything moving forward. And I hope that we can find some sort of, moderate or middle in this, administration. I think everyone wants to hold Joe Biden accountable, even if you're radical left or radical right. I think everyone knows that there's still a lot to be done, and hopefully we can, move forward in that direction. But I think, like Shai said, there's a lot that we almost can't change. And, Joe said this earlier, I think, democracy is broken at this point. It's just the machine is broken. Joe said that. So I think there needs to be radical change. It does. And I think anyone can agree with that at this point, and that's what we need to move towards.
Since I watched the Jubilee episode, since the 2020 election, since we got the results, there's still change that needs to be done. We're not done with racism or climate change or prison reform. We still need change done. And there are still people who support Trump's agenda and that do support the Republican right agenda, quote, the right agenda. And so just recognizing that we need to come together and recognizing that we still need to make change is something that's so important. And to anyone that's going to watch this, like, make the change. That's so important. So I want to quickly wrap up and say thank you all so much for being here. None of this was scripted. None of this was staged. We're all real people. We're all people fighting for a change. We're all real people wanting change. And so to everyone that's watching this, make a change, go vote for progress, and make change in this world. Bye, everyone.
Take care.